All right, welcome to Unit 5. Four down, four to go. Let me get my share working so we can all be looking at the slides and get this all together here. There we go. All right, so to not delay, we'll roll right in here. Unit 5 corresponds with Chapter 6. And let me get my slides to move forward. So to get your kind of head in position here, the first four units that we covered really looked at internal to the organization. What are your resources? What are your capabilities? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Then we looked at externally. What's the competitive market look like? What's the supplier market look like? Resources. And then we defined those five generic strategies. So when we turn the corner into 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're really looking about developing and executing strategy. So the first four were about figuring out what's going on, and the next four are about doing something about it. So we've covered all that. What we're really going to look at in this unit is competitive action. So what should we do? There's just basically three questions to answer, and then the timing of what we do. And there's a lot of kind of thinking that goes into the timing of this. I'm going to just set up the question a little bit and give you something to think about. The chapter does a nice job of unpacking some of that. So, but it hit a couple highlight items from the chapter, and then I want to touch quickly on this week's DQ, and then just take a couple minutes to review again about the assignment that's due this week, which is on vertical integration, which is a 10-page paper and that 5 to 10 minute presentation. So that's a pretty big set of deliverables. So when it comes to competitive action, there's really three things. I put offense, defense, but there's a third one I'm going to show you. I like the third one best. But it's really first a foundational question of offense or defense. So the first time, I will say from my experience, defense never works in the long run. It's more of a question of timing and say, okay, I'm going to go on the defensive now. So I'm just going to try to hold on to my market share. I'm holding on to my current product mix. I'm just going to see if I can hold out and my revenues will stay steady. My belief is you cannot do that in the long run. You've got to go on an offensive strategy because eventually, in a defensive perspective, there's only so long you can hold out. Sooner or later, somebody's going to come along with a better product or better service or lower price or something. So if you're not being offensive and coming up with new products and new services and looking at your pricing and looking at your cost, you're really not going to survive in the long run. So I think defense is really a short-term alternative. The offense is not just am I going to develop new products, but much more intentionality from the standpoint of who am I going after? Is there geographic territory I want to expand into? Are there products I want to expand into? Who's already in that space? And how am I going to run them out? How am I going to steal their customers? Is it a pricing issue? Is it a quality issue? Is it a features issue? Is it a marketing and promotional issue? So it boils down pretty quick. And we spent those first four units really learning about ourselves and our market and our competitors and what's going on. And so where we move in the space is comes out pretty quickly. This, you don't have to give this a whole lot of thought. You kind of know at this point, okay, here's what we're going to do. But I do want to mention this one. Blue Ocean. The text mentions it, which is great. They go into it a little bit. Blue Ocean is a really great concept. There's a book on this, and I think the book is called Blue Ocean's Thinking, I believe. And I really like this. And so even Blue Oceans would say that there are no boundaries. Um, but in reality, in business, we know there's boundaries. There's competitors. They've staked out their territory geographically. They've got a product line. They've got pricing structures. We've got pricing structures. So there's a lot of constraints and boundaries when we go to execute a strategy. So it isn't often blue ocean. Blue ocean is the concept that there's this whole wide world out there, and we can just choose our path, and there's nothing to block us, which is not usually the case. However, I would say if you're involved in developing strategy, you should always ask this question. Even though you know there's all these competitors, constraints, and all these challenges to what you're going to do, it's always nice to just stop and take a breath for a minute and go, okay, what if there were no constraints and there were no boundaries? What would we as a company do? What product would we launch? Where would we sell it? Who would we sell it to? How much would we charge? Because that's the real dream of what you'd like. And then you can start carving away at that and go, well, the reality is we can't do this, we can't do that, and da, 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 da. And then you still end up with something probably pretty rich. Now, what the text really gets into, which is not incorrect, is they talk about companies who truly come in to a blue ocean. And Etsy is the example they use. And the concept is that if your organization or your company comes up with some product or service that is so unique that the market just doesn't even exist, that you get to define the boundaries. You get to define what your product is, who it serves, what price it's done at. So it really is no boundaries. And so Etsy, if you're not familiar with them, they came in, was a fantastic innovation. And they said, what about all these people that make handcraft type products, high quality wood products and textiles and you name it. And people make these things in their home, but there's limited ways that they can sell these products because, they're a small company, they're a mom and pop, maybe just a mom, maybe just a pop, and they've got some really cool products, but they can't get them out to the market very efficiently. And Etsy came into that space and said, well, how about if we set up an incredible web presence that will allow people to highlight those products and will allow customers to select from those products, and we'll handle the order placement and the payment and the paperwork, and we'll just send the cottage industry craftsman the order, and they will ship the order to the customer. So they're along the Amazon line, but they're really serving the crafts market, a space that really isn't well served. So Etsy's a great example. The other one I think of is Apple. When Apple first came out with the iPhone, so and this you may have been like 2 years old when that happened, but I remember we had flip phones, so we had mobile phones, and we thought they were really great, and you could text a little bit, but the texting was really difficult. Um, but we didn't know that we needed a smartphone, and there were no apps, and we didn't know why we would need an app or what we would possibly do, because I pick up my phone and I make a call, and that's all I ever wanted to do. And suddenly Apple had to teach us. So they had to create the market, they had to educate the consumer on what a smartphone was. And then they had to get other groups to see how cool it was and actually build apps that would run on the smartphone. So they kind of created that whole space, and that can be very, very expensive, very difficult, spending tens of thousands of millions of dollars to create a market for something that doesn't even exist. But then once you do, it's yours. So think about that a little bit. I love that blue ocean question. The other part of the text, there's two other big items coming out. One is timing then. So when do I make my strategic move? And most folks are familiar with the term first mover advantage. There's been some papers and books written that call it first mover disadvantage because the first mover doesn't always win. There's some really good discussion in the text. I'll let you look at the details on that, but I would like to put the challenge out there that often there's this assumption that the first mover always captures more market share and will be more profitable into the future than anyone else who enters the market. And that's not always the case. I love the reference. Somebody said, the second mouse gets the cheese, the first mouse gets dead. And that's what often happens with a first mover. They'll jump out into a product or a market, and the market's not ready, and the product maybe not quite ready. And it takes longer to launch than they thought it would, and they run out of money or time or resources before they can really reach success. So first movers don't always work out so well. Where first movers often work out is if you think about Starbucks, they come into a community and they get the best location. And maybe McDonald's is one that has done that as well. They have gotten that prime spot on that right corner where all the traffic is. And so everybody goes past there. Wawa does a great job with that here in New Jersey. So there are advantages sometimes to being first mover. You might secure a location or a patent or a license or something that the later competitors who enter the market will not have access to. So first mover can be important, but you really got to stop and think. I know I've worked in higher ed for the last 20 years, And we've actually come up with some innovative ideas and products in the form of programs. And we have at times had to say, well, hold it, that's really innovative, but there is no market for it yet. We need to wait until the market matures. And so there's people that actually know the value of that degree. AI would be an example. AI has been around for 20 years. We called it machine learning back in the day. And it wasn't the time yet to launch AI programs. Now is the time. Everybody knows what AI is. Everybody sees how powerful it is. It's matured. So timing is important. And that's where this late mover, or what I call a fast second, sometimes you can let that Apple get out there, let that Starbucks get out there and tell people that they need to be paying $5 for a cup of coffee. And then I'm going to come in right behind them and open in a almost as good a location. I'm only going to charge $4 for that coffee. I might really make out. So you can strategically watch what's going on with the first mover, learn from them, and be extremely successful as a second or later mover. So the big topic, though, for the week, because this feeds into your big assignment, is scope of operations. So the terms merger acquisition, horizontal, vertical, and strategic alliance. I'm going to show you a little example right here that I hope will kind of pull all that together for you. So think of your focal firm, and you're going to pick a firm to use for your project, whatever that might be. Uh, your focal firm. This ties in the supply chain concept, if you've ever had a supply chain course, but it also talks about this horizontal and vertical integration. So think about your focal firm, and then horizontally, there's other competitors that produce similar products and services and are selling to similar customers as you are. So I could go to Target, I could go to Walmart, I could go to Big Lots, I could go to Safeway. I could get a lot of the same products across those. So those would all be horizontal competitors in that space. But this project that you're going to work on isn't talking about horizontal integration. It's talking specifically about vertical integration. So vertical integration is the concept of the supply chain. And so if you think of your focal firm, you get inputs from someplace. That might be stationary supplies, it might be computers and technology equipment, it might be raw materials, it might be finished goods that you're going to resell. But anything you procure comes from vertical, backwards vertical, or what we call upstream in the supply chain. You're bringing them in from somewhere. And then we also realized that those suppliers are getting things from suppliers. And there's actually, we call these tiers. So it's tier one are the ones closest to you. And then tier two is where they're getting their stuff. And then tier three is where they're getting their stuff. And there can be 5, 6, 9 tiers deep in a supply chain. So just be aware that those are going on. And the concept of backwards integration is the focal firm going further out and buying up potentially their suppliers. Keep in mind the other direction of the supply chain, or what we call forward vertical integration. That's where my firm sells products to a wholesaler, who then sells it to a distributor, who then sells it to a retailer, who then potentially sells it to the end customer. So there can be many layers in both directions. And the question of integration or scope of operations is, as the focal firm, how far do I want to pull each direction? And there has to be a reason for that. Maybe it's because of costs and it's just costing me too much to buy these raw materials. So I am going to purchase that raw material supplier, and I'm going to then avoid having to pay him his profit. And I'm going to maybe make his operation more efficient, and possibly I'm going to make it so they can't sell their product to my competitors. So there has to be a good reason to do this, but it's often involved in the cost efficiency or competition space. But let's look at an example. Amazon as our focal firm. We've learned a lot about Amazon through the last few units. And one thing we learned was Amazon did forward vertical integration because they started as just a bookseller, and they took orders, and then they passed orders back to the printers and the publishers and so forth of these books. And those publishers then sent them to UPS and to FedEx to deliver to the end customer. But Amazon realized over time that they had economies of scale. And so they, instead of using wholesalers, retailers, FedEx, and UPS, they have their own trucks, they have their own warehouses. And so that's forward vertical integration. But then just last week, we learned that they also did backward vertical integration and they purchased Whole Foods. And so now Whole Foods, who could have just been a supplier sending nutritional, high quality foods through Amazon, they purchased them. And so now Whole Foods is completely owned by Amazon. So that's a backward integration. And let's add one more layer to this because we learned last week that Whole Foods has strategic alliances with their growers. And so a strategic alliance is a little different because it's a legal agreement. These are still two separate companies, or three or five or 11 separate companies. They are not owned by the same group. They are a strategic alliance. So we have a written agreement that says this is how we're going to do business, and it's going to save you money, and it's going to save me money. And I may even provide capital to help you expand your business. I may provide marketing money to help you do your business. And I may forbid you from selling your product to my competitors. There's lots of legal agreements that can go into a strategic alliance. So let me just sum up just one little item on this. Mergers and acquisitions are about ownership. So Amazon owns Whole Foods. Mergers are a little different legally than acquisitions because of how the assets are shared and who's the leadership and so forth. But effectively, we have encompassed them, that we are now one. Strategic alliance does not change the ownership. We are still separate companies, but we have an agreement, a very formal, rich, beneficial agreement in how we're do business. So strategic alliance, no ownership involved. Whew. Just trying to get those concepts out there. Don't see anything popping up in the chat, so I'll just keep pushing. Um, Brief comment on the discussion question this week. The discussion question is about strategic alliances. And specifically, we know that a large percentage of them fail. And you can imagine why. We're taking two completely different companies that are owned by different entities, and we're coming up with an agreement that they're going to work together. And we may be too different to work together. So think about dating relationships, think about marriage relationships. They don't always work out. And so think about why then strategic alliances don't work out. The Walmart example is really good in the book. I would also think of the Star Alliance. I fly a lot for work. And in the airline industry, United and I don't know, must have 6, 8, 10 different airlines, major airlines are all in this Star Alliance, which is great for me because I fly on United and then I get handed off to China Air. Sometimes I go Singapore Air. So all of them are members of Star Alliance. So it makes my ticketing really easy. It makes my just setting up my flight really easy. It makes my check-in really easy. My bag gets handed off with no problems. And then all my miles go back to my United account. So I love the Star Alliance. Um, but the DQ is asking you to look at fail examples. So here's the big one. What I really wanted to get to was the Unit 5 assignment. I did add this slide last week. This is a big assignment. This is effectively your term paper for the semester. It's a 10-page paper with a 5 or 10-minute presentation. Little note, we had a little discussion yesterday during office hours. In order to record your presentation, if you do it in PowerPoint, keep in mind that the new version of PowerPoint has the record option in it, which is awesome. And all you have to do is build your PowerPoint slides, build all your animations into it, hit record, and it'll run your presentation. And it puts your picture in a little circle down on the bottom corner. I used it to do my introduction to the course that I sent you by email before the course started. So try that out. It's a great tool, and as long as you build your PowerPoint slides rather than using that Google tool, um, if you do it in PowerPoint, all you have to do is hit the record button, and then at the end you tell it to make an MP4, and you can upload the MP4. It's really cool. Try out using AI, but just use it for input for ideas. AI is a great ideation tool. So if you're stuck, AI is the way to go. I use it all the time in that. but make sure that you just get some information from it and then you take that information and add your own knowledge on top of it and make it your own. Don't just cut and paste what AI gives you. I'm going to run it through zero GPT. I'm going to catch you every time. It's going to be a zero. So be careful in how much you use AI. You can also run your paper through zero GPT yourself and make sure that everything comes out clean. Keep in mind the outline. Section one, set up this company. Who are you talking about? Tell us about them. When did they start? How big are they? What's their growth pattern? What's their ownership? What strategic moves have they made recently? Provide a SWOT analysis of them. Go in and discuss that. It's a 10-page paper, so it takes some content to fill out 10 pages. Section two is where we really get into the vertical integration question. Are they doing forward integration, backward integration, or both? How's it working for them? What's your experience with seeing them work on it? Section three, make sure you have some type of conclusion. This is good. They should do more. They should try this direction, so forth. So make sure you reference any of your sources, a references list at the end, and then in-text citations. And I have a sample out there in the announcements. Make sure you use a cover page and that you use headings to organize your sections. So my share stopped, and so Pascal, I see you're in there. I know we talked about a lot of this yesterday. Did that's because I was gonna trying to make it a little shorter this time for folks. Any questions?
Hi, Professor Porterfield. I am all good on questions. You clarified everything pretty great, so I am good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I enjoyed our discussion yesterday. The office hours worked out great.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to keep it to like 20 minutes today because then there's a greater chance that other people will actually watch it. And I think papers would be much better if they took that few minutes to watch it. But there's only so much you can do.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
All right, I'm gonna drop it there then, okay? Then just check in with me if you need anything, all right?
Okay, will do. Have a good one.
See ya.